Your home is not just four walls. It's a living, beautiful, breathing space that supports your health, your family, your life, and even your future. What if the right design could even ease the stress of caregiving? It could bring generations closer together and allow aging adults to live with both dignity, safety, comfort, and independence. Well, today on Always Ageless, we're diving into a conversation that affects almost every family. How do we create homes that truly work for us as we age? My guest, Raad Ghantous, is no stranger to this challenge, that's for sure. He's a global hospitality and wellness designer who has spent more than 30 years shaping experiences in hotels, spas, and communities around the world. But he's also turned his creative eye towards some real issues that families face every day with things like ADUs, which is our auxiliary dwelling units, generational living, multi generational living, and aging in place, knowing that scenery around you actually changes how you feel in your home. And we learned something else. Rod recently had a visit um, in Africa that actually changed his life, and we're actually going to have him talk about that also. So, whether you're considering building an ADU for your mom or dad, you're rethinking your own future home, or you're just curious about how design impacts your life, this conversation is going to inspire you to see your space in a whole new way and not with just by you don't have to be an expensive designer or hire one either. Rod, as you know, we've looked forward to having you on our show for a very long time. We are so glad
Indeed.
you're here. We waited while you traveled around the world so you could come back and be on Always Ageless. Welcome today to be on our show.
Thank you, Valerie. It's really a pleasure. Yes, we have definitely been working on trying to make this happen for a bit.
We have. Given your history and your background, tell us a little bit about how it brought you to caring about housing for aging adults and their families. And actually, let's don't do that. Let's go first to your recent trip. I may have told you ever since I was a little girl, my dream is go on an African safari.
Yeah.
When you said you were going to Africa, I just was so excited. I felt like I was going with you. But I know that you talked about how that actually was life changing.
Yeah.
And I know that you have a show called The Red Life, which is focused also on experiences that people have in their
Yeah.
older years, just like we do here at Always Ageless. So let's talk about your trip to Africa. What did that really mean to you? What was it, what you hoped it would be? What can our listeners hear from you about that experience?
It's a really good few questions, and it's definitely makes me think. I mean, going to Africa, the exotic nature of the trip, the safari, the animals, all that stuff is in itself pretty grand, right? And to do it where you are maybe at a transformational point in your life, or like you're wondering what's next, so to speak, right? I had just turned 60 in January, and so to me, and I don't feel quote unquote whatever 60 is supposed to feel like, but you're right. I mean, it's such a stupid thing with numbers, but there was a layer to the experience of going to Africa or doing that kind of excursion that also was a little bit maybe deeper. Like it was when I said to you when you asked me, I said it was life changing. I think it was life changing in that it was expansive first and foremost. I think sometimes we feel we forget that there's a whole world out there. There's a whole world of experiences out there, and we are sort of in our lane, and we're so focused, and we're just like in this little microcosm of
Yeah.
where we can thrive, and we can succeed, and we can keep our swim in well for professionally or personally or whatever. But there's a whole world out there, and sometimes it actually helps expand the soul, expand the thinking. Even you could even argue kind of like keep you more youthful and curious, honestly,
Oh,
right?
definitely.
Yeah, by actually just stepping outside that comfort zone, stepping outside that four defining parameters or boundaries, physical boundaries, whether it's county, whether it's state, whether it's just your home. So Africa was a very interesting experience. I was there for almost 2 weeks. I then extended for another 3 or 4 days because I wanted to interview a couple of people there. Again, having been doing the Rad Life show for about 10 years, I was now on the road and I wanted to interview some interesting characters there. Even though our focus has now been elevated after 10 years of interviewing anybody that we like that are curious about, I think that's still an underlying current. It's like whatever I'm interested in as I get older. Uh, when we first started, the focus was on, like, say, baby boomers and issues that were aging related. But then that very easily became an age exploration of things that, as I got older, was interesting to me, people I encountered, experiences, and I would bring them to share. So this was kind of in that same line, and it was with the gentleman who basically had the put the company together for the safaris and was being very successful, and his background was interesting, so I interviewed him. I also, for those who know, I will occasionally, partake and enjoy a good cigar. So I found a manufacturer of cigars in Zimbabwe. These two gentlemen were
Oh,
in Zimbabwe, made from Zimbabwean tobacco. Who knew that there was such a thing as tobacco in
no.
Zimbabwe that was grown? I thought everything was in North Carolina.
And
And
how was it?
let's just say that it was satisfactory while I was there. Um, and the joke actually was with the gentleman who had the factory, who, by the way, in another story of reinvention, reinvented himself like 5 years ago when he decided he was going to do a cigar company. Up till that point, he had never smoked a cigar and had been working for Delta out of Atlanta. And so
Gosh,
he went to Cuba, he went to Nicaragua, he saw how those factories were set up. He brought somebody who would help him, and they set up a little factory in Zimbabwe, in the capital of Harare. And so when I first sampled his cigars, I was not in Harare, but I happened to be sitting at a dinner table at a restaurant with the gentleman who runs the safari company. And the gentleman at the safari company, when I told him, hey, I just found these cigars, it's interesting. I don't even know, are they made here? What's the deal? He goes, oh, I know the guy who owns the company, and who connected me with him on WhatsApp right there at the dinner table. And so I jokingly said to the guy, I said, I have a bone to pick with you. Your cigars are dry. I said,
oh,
but I said I need to come to your factory and basically complain in person. That was my sort of introduction to wanting to do an interview with
of
him.
course, yeah, of course.
But the reason, I mean, to be fair to his product, it was just not in a humidor in the gift shop there where I found it at the restaurant. So but yeah, I mean, that was sort of another experience. And it was, when I say life changing, Africa was life changing. It wasn't life changing in that I had never experienced this kind of serendipity or alignment of things. But when you're younger, I think you do it almost subconsciously. You don't have a clarity or an intentionality, like this is sort of the thing that resonates with you. This rhythm is actually in alignment with who you are. You just happen to do what you're doing. You
Exactly.
haven't sat still long enough to really understand that this is part of your credo. So when I went to Africa, I was already kind of along those lines. And when was happening and unfolding with me, whether it was from this gentleman that was doing the safaris, who then basically happens to know this guy with the cigar company. And then when I went to meet with the guy with the cigar company, I was flying through Johannesburg, and he said, "Oh, would you want to have, that one day or 3/4 of the day that you're there? Would you like to have somebody show you around Joburg?" And I said, "Sure."
Of
And in
course.
the course of doing that, I then basically ended up going to the Nelson Mandela House and seeing the museum in Soweto, and seeing the dualities and the parallels that are, like, from one extreme to the other in South Africa, in Johannesburg itself, just in terms of from one neighborhood to another neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
And how people are living there. And then we happened to sit at a coffee shop waiting till my flight. You have to take me to the airport. And he said, "Well, let me introduce you to this friend of mine who basically happens to live down the street. Maybe he'll come and have a beer with us or something." I said, "Sure." So he comes over, and this guy basically starts talking about how in his 30s he actually he quit his job, sold everything. He was in an agency in Germany, and basically got on a motorcycle because he had just done a motorcycle trip with his best friend, and it had a timeline, like when it started, when it finished, and he felt like that was too short. So he wanted to get on another motorcycle ride and not have an end date in mind.
Oh,
and ended up taking motorcycle ride across Europe, through Asia, down to Australia, over to Africa, and back up to Germany. And it ended when it ended. And how that was very life changing in how he perceives and interacts with life after he did that trip. And here I was basically encountering these people that were again reminding me about reinvention, whether it was a reinvention in terms of their career choice or reinvention by coming back to their country, and basically, putting out not only an enterprise but one that had a social consciousness that actually helped people. And then here's this guy who now basically is stationed in South Africa, who had gone back to Germany, worked at whatever, and now he's writing a history book and consulting from overseas. So life changing in that it reminded me just how expansive the world is and how
yeah,
limitless our options really are, and that we are the ones who get to decide what is the life that we want to design
absolutely. Yeah.
on our own terms at any point in our life. We're faced with adversity, we're faced with loss, we're faced with challenges, but we
Yeah.
always remain. Um, one of my favorite mantras right now, and it's actually sitting on the new magazine that we just launched for this issue, is freedom always. You always have freedom to
I saw
decide
that. Yes.
how to design your life on your own terms. It doesn't mean that it's an excuse for selfishness or an excuse for basically hurting people in the process, but it's a very wide space in which you take and you give your permission to actually design your life on your own terms, and not be coming at it from a place of scarcity or fear, but actually from a place of abundance and positive potential. And that's sort of the when I say it was life changing. And then I kind of like, rubber stamped it and kind of like just sealed it with an action at the end, because unbeknownst to anybody who was on the trip with me, I extended those 4 days. And one thing in my mind was, maybe I'll bungee jump off the Victoria Falls Bridge. Now, for those who don't know, the Victoria Falls Bridge symbolically also bridges one country to another. So imagine the symbolism. You're in one spot, and this bridge actually bridges like Zimbabwe from I'm gonna get it wrong. Maybe Zambia, I think it is. But it's like it bridges that, and it sits over one of the three largest waterfalls in the world. Niagara is the other one, and I forget what the third one is. But three waterfalls. This is one of the three largest waterfalls in the world, and it is a UNESCO cultural site. And I decided I was going to bungee jump off this bridge. And when you bungee jump, for anybody who knows about bungee jumping, you don't just walk up to the edge and just kind of drop. You actually walk up to the edge and you got to propel yourself. You got to propel yourself off the bridge. Otherwise, you may hit yourself against the bridge.
Right.
So you're
Yep.
consciously projecting yourself into the abyss, if you will, right?
Yep.
And I did it because I wanted to have a reference point physically, mentally, body, memory, emotionally.
Tell us about that.
Never done that before. Never done anything like that before. The coolest thing is maybe I tandem, uh, jumped out of a plane, skydived for a friend of mine's birthday where a whole bunch of us went, and I was tethered to this guy. So I did that because I had realized over the last, say, half a year that we have an interesting relationship with uncertainty, of not knowing what the outcome is going to be, right? But still taking the journey.
Exactly. Yes.
And
It is.
that uncertainty relationship we have usually as adults
Mm-hmm.
is in direct contrast with this uncertainty relationship we have, or the relationship we have with uncertainty and not knowing when we're children. When we're children, you wake up in the morning and you don't know what the day is going to bring necessarily. You have the confines and protection of the family, whatever, but you don't know what the day is going to bring.
Yep.
And you actually have a bit of excitement and joy about not knowing what the day is going to bring. So when it happens, you're like, wow, that was interesting, or wow, that was really great. Like there's a little wonder that happens, right? And a little
There
little
is.
little positive
Absolutely. There is.
endorphins that happens out of the. So we don't embrace uncertainty as a thing to be worried about, to feel anxious about, to be afraid of. We look at it as being possibility a little bit, that we don't know what that is. And what happens when we get older and we take on like sort of responsibilities and roles and what have you, we start
Yeah.
basically divining uncertainty as being something to be worried about, something to put contingency plans against, things to basically work towards trying to mitigate.
Yes, that's
The
true.
less uncertain and ambiguous something
Yep.
is, the more likely it will not disrupt our lives.
Right.
But when we do that at the cost of losing that wonder that we had when we were children. And what I realized is it's not that we no longer have that muscle, it's that muscle of embracing uncertainty with a certain positivity, not reckless, but still positivity. That muscle still exists. It's just that it's a little atrophied because we haven't used it for the better part of the last, say, 40 years, right? And so when I realized that, and I wanted to change the narrative on the fact that uncertainty is only grounds for worry and fear, I wanted to have a benchmark moment where I could refer to mind, body, memory,
Thing.
emotional, soul, whatever, right? You want to call it, that when it manifested, that was literally tangible. So jumping off the bridge, 39 stories of a drop, right? 390 feet or something like that, was actually, for me, something that now I can go back and refer to. If I face something during my day or whatever that seems overwhelming or whatever, by actually reminding myself that, look, let's have a little perspective here. You jumped off a bridge not knowing what the outcome was going to be. You didn't take a completely uncalculated risk, but you still did that action. You still proceeded to follow through on something that seemed like you didn't have 100% control over. So what you're facing right now, is
It's
it
not.
really the big thing that you are making? Is it really the thing that you are, either catastrophizing, or your mind just won't shut down and is constantly playing these scenarios of negative thing? Is it really that? How does it compare to jumping off a bridge 39 stories? This is probably nothing compared to that. So then it gives me an ability to reground and have perspective. So again, how was the trip to Africa? It was kind of life changing.
Kind of life changing. That's amazing. And while we're talking about Africa and people who can do what they love, actually, the world lost Jane Goodall today,
Oh,
91 years old. And she lived a wonderful life doing what she wanted to do, being in
yeah,
Africa with the beautiful animals. And I grew up as a little girl. I wanted to be a nurse in Africa. That's all I
yeah.
ever wanted to be. And I never made it there. Still haven't been to Africa, but that's my dream vacation. So
I'm working.
I
I'm working on a safari excursion under the Rad Life. So
sign me up. Sign me up.
next year.
Certainly a lot of people before this current time went and did amazing things. So let's talk back about housing
Yeah,
and design and how we can help our viewers and our listeners be more comfortable and feel safe and secure and more confident with their housing decisions right now.
right.
And I really think that that is part of the issue is they just don't know what to do.
It's
And
true. Yeah.
And I am convinced that many of us grew up not thinking that we would be at this age caring for our aging parents. We thought that
No,
our parents would be
no,
gone.
absolutely,
We would
absolutely. And
be,
I think if anything, our parents probably shielded us from when they did it for theirs, which
well,
is
except in my case, I didn't have any grandparents
uh,
after I was 8 years old.
yeah.
So I didn't go through that. Some kids did, but I didn't. I wasn't fortunate to do
I
that.
mean, even if you think about like ourselves, right? If you have kids, you're not gonna. The ideal scenario in your mind is you're not gonna burden them with something, right? So
Right.
I think to your point though is people don't know, and part of why they don't know is because in most cases they've either been spared that, or maybe they have been not physically around it, and it's not really part of life until you experience it. Like you can't really explain to somebody 100% what it takes and what the impacts are and how they ripple through your life and your relationships and all this stuff when you are caring for a parent who maybe has Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or something like that. And I know people that are not necessarily older that are dealing with that. There's some people where their parents have early onset. And so
Yes.
they may be in their 30s and facing it. I remember one time interviewing a gentleman on my show where he was like in high school when his father basically
Yeah.
was going through this.
Yeah.
So unless you have encountered it, unless you've been exposed to it, you don't understand, and understandably so, what it really is involved and how everything from being prepared, having all the paperwork and everything in place the way it needs to be, because something as simple as somebody having Parkinson's, it's very difficult for them to sign a power of attorney. It's
Sure.
very difficult for them to have a notary public approve their signature, right? So things like that you don't think of, and until I
No.
encountered them with my dad and my sister, and I having to encounter this, who nobody told me, and I was doing a show for 10
No.
years about aging and being prepared, and I thought I was preparing myself, and it was never really the
We
same,
weren't.
right?
Oh, we
But
weren't.
but 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 the big part of that is also, and it stems from financial realities, but it also stems from housing options. A
Yes.
big part of
Yes.
that is when you're caring for somebody like that, whether it's temporarily, they could be basically coming out of, a pretty severe cancer surgery, for example,
Sure.
breast cancer, whatever, the
Yes.
environment in which you are, because most medical situations now will discharge you as fast as they can discharge you.
And they do.
And they
Yes.
do, right?
They do.
So where do you go? You're going to go to a treatment facility until you get released to home. You go home. Is the home conducive to the way that you need to recover, whether temporarily or more extended time? Um, it's very most likely is not, unless you have proactively set it up that way. Like when we built a house for for my parents, when my father retired, we consciously designed a guest bedroom downstairs. We consciously made sure that that bedroom had a shower and not a tub. We consciously made sure that everything was zero threshold flow on hard surfaces. We have car air rugs down, but they could be removed. We had a wide enough area in the stairwell to allow for potential either exposed elevator or maybe a stacking of closets so that we could put in an elevator in a closet. Some of the stuff was built into the house so that it would provide maximum independent living for someone should their conditions change. But in most cases, the inventory that's out there, including some of the stuff that's newly being released on the market, by the way,
Yeah.
but maybe to a lesser degree, is not conducive for that.
No.
It does not allow for that independent dignity living as conditions change.
And it
So
seems, and there's two things. It's either functional or it's just ugly. Right? I stayed in a hotel a couple nights ago in an accessible room, and it was so offensive. And I felt sorry for someone who had to be in that room who actually needed those grab bars and the way that the bathroom was set up and the way the room was set up. It was just so offensive, um, that just wasn't very nice. Who would want to go there and stay in that room?
so here's what's the interesting reality of that, right? Now, prior to kind of, I think, I guess I've ever since I was in business school, I have an undergrad in economics and a
Yeah.
master's of marketing, and did this, design as sort of a follow-up degree that I happened to fall into. I originally was supposed to be a civil engineer, so I was familiar with the construction side of things. I had grown up on job sites with my father, but I had not really pursued that first. And then I found myself in the space of design. And I remember even as early as when the ADA regulations
Just came
became
out.
a fact of life. The American Disabilities Act. So with the ADA rules coming into play, we ended up with having to now adhere to that in a commercial setting, right?
Yes.
Well, again, I was doing design school, but I was kind of leaning towards being involved in sort of hospitality or hotel work, right? So if you're looking at five-star hotel work, even as early as those days, in
Mhm.
order to meet the requirements, the federal requirements for the ADA compliancy, those hotels were not going to charge less for those rooms on new projects. They needed to basically be addressed in a manner that was not going to take away from the quality of offering, right? And if you've been to a, say, a 3-star hotel extended stay and you've gone to into those rooms now, they're even better than they were before. But if you go to a 5-star property or a resort property and you happen to be in an ADA room, it doesn't look ADA. In fact, the words disability don't necessarily apply because you're still charging that higher rate for the room
Yeah,
every night, right?
right there.
So
Yep.
the application of those meeting those requirements to allow for independent um, maneuverability and experience, positive experience,
Mobility, sure.
mobility, right? Uh, those solutions had to be not only aesthetic and functional, but they also had to be positively experiential,
Yes,
right? So
right.
there's another label that really applies better when you start applying the guidelines beyond just the minimums of the ADA. When you start looking at it as being a design philosophy, there's a term that is a little bit more inclusive called universal design,
Yes, we
which
talk about
basically,
universal design.
right,
Yes,
which universal design means equal accessibility, mobility, experience,
yes,
and in usability, engagement with the space, regardless
exactly.
age, physical mobility, whatever it is, right?
And
And
still pleasing and still aesthetically pleasing.
not only aesthetically pleasing, and I think that's where like design sometimes gets regarded in a limited manner.
It
It's
does.
not just aesthetically pleasing; it's experientially immersive and engaging,
Yes,
right? So, for example, you have a sphere that has water running on it. If you're incorporating that into a sensory garden, no matter whether a person is in a wheelchair or standing up or is an older parent with grandkids or a family of
whatever
four,
they are.
they're all going to be able to experience this. If you place that sphere with the tactile water element at a height that is universally usable, accessible by everybody. If you put it too high, you've eliminated some of the people. If you put it too low, you've eliminated some of the people, right? Because we talk about people's flexibility and mobility, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
universal design actually is a better term to use as a direction for wanting to achieve more than the bare minimum.
Yes.
Unfortunately, for the longest time, and that applies to what we refer to as aging in place too. In my mind, aging in place as a term is limiting, similar to when you say ADA. I think if you say universal design, lifetime homes, or home, forever homes, if you will, whatever that you want the term you want to use, then it opens up the conversation to not what is the least we can do, but what is the most that we can do that's cost effective,
Yes.
appropriate for the budget, but maximize the quality of life?
Yes. So and my so for example, back to my mom, there's a community in Huntington Beach, the 55 plus community, and I've
Yeah.
seen these before. They're 55 plus communities. All that means is that they don't have children and it's gated and all these other things. But the architectural layout of the home, she can't get a wheelchair in the shower. She can't get or even a walker because she
Yes,
doesn't use a
ma'am.
wheelchair. A walker into the bathroom. I mean,
Yep.
the shower handle is way up high. It's just ridiculous. And
Microwaves are still above the
mi
stove.
microwaves, so we have to put a microwave on the counter, um, all kinds of
The,
things.
the, the corridors are not wide enough.
No, they're not. All
The
kinds of
doors
things.
are not wide enough. Yeah,
Right. So
that
these are
actually, Valerie, I'm not going to name names, but that actually is still the problem in some of the stuff that's currently coming on the market as new builds, believe it or not.
yes, it is. It is. It is. We're building a house. We're building a house. We'll move in the next couple of weeks. I can't reach the fan over the stove. And they said, "Well, there's a little app you can use." I said, "I don't want to use the app in the kitchen to turn on my fan, right?"
Yeah.
Well, but that's the rule because you have to have it this high over the gas stove and over this and okay, all that's fine. But we
Yet,
made some
if you put the fan actually in a soffit above the kitchen, rather than only be above the stove. If you actually provided another fan above the kitchen
Yes.
and you put the switch
Right.
on a wall that's accessible like a regular switch, then you basically have solved that problem. And what does
We
it
could,
really cost to do that?
nothing, nothing. But I didn't know about it until it was already in, and that's another subject. But we just want to interrupt a second and say, if someone's
Yeah.
just listening to us, just joining us, that you have joined us on Always Ageless and here on KMET 1490 AM radio. And you're listening to our discussion about housing and creating the best living environment for you and your aging parents and your blended family. You can email your questions for Rod or I at ageless, Valerie at alwaysageless.com. Valerie at alwaysageless.com. We do answer all of your emails and we'd be glad to answer your questions during this discussion. So let's talk about ADUs because you're
Mhm.
pretty good at that. And we have those, just for the benefit of our audience, those are auxiliary dwelling units. So it used to be they were called granny flats.
Mhm.
But then because the state of California said we need more housing, they changed them to auxiliary dwelling units and they changed the guidelines. So it used to be, in order to have a granny flat, you had to have a really large lot. It was at one time a minimum of 10,000 square feet. And
Yeah.
that extra unit that you built on your property had to have setbacks, so much space between the unit and the fence on all three sides.
Mhm.
Now, because we're trying to increase the number of housing units in the state of California, you can have an auxiliary dwelling unit in your backyard that I think it's even as narrow as 5 or 6 feet from the lot line. So more people are building more auxiliary dwelling units.
Mhm.
This is great because you can have another family member live with you. As a matter of fact, we have someone we interviewed recently where the younger group in the family bought that house. They're living in the ADU. Their older family members are in the single story house in the front.
Yep.
And when they're gone, then the kids will move into the bigger house.
Yep.
So, so that's a really good thing. And actually, I don't know your personal opinion, although I think I do. I personally think it is one of the least or the most underutilized property opportunities right now. I think
So
people are not using it enough.
I
Your
will.
opinion?
Well, I will say. By the way, I love how you said pose the question that said your opinion. It reminds me of Jim McClare. Basically, it's like go like when he would basically pose the person, and then he would basically launch like the person. Okay, now you weigh in on this stuff. That was really very good for those
Okay.
who are basically old journalism and talk show fans. But I will tell you about ADUs. ADUs is at risk, in my opinion, because when they did it, that was the idea. It was a granny flat, right? But very quickly, because the cities then also expedited it. If you're going to do an ADU, the city would fast track it. And I
Yeah.
think that was because they realized that there's not enough housing for seniors. And in most cases, housing for seniors, just so we can paint a picture here, assisted living, independent living, all that stuff, there really isn't an insurance that covers it. So you would actually have to be paying from family assets to house a loved one in some sort of senior sensitive environment.
Yes.
So that means that you're depleting from family assets in the course of doing that. Plus, it's not cheap. Plus, it then doesn't really necessarily include the medical. That's another layer of cost.
Yes.
So there was a time when you could apply as a family member to be recognized as an actual caregiver and basically get a stipend from the state to
Yes.
basically provide that service to a loved one in the home. It goes back to where do you provide that service? What is the environment that's conducive to do that? So ADUs came about and they were, like 750 square feet, single story, put in the backyard. And a lot of cities embraced that because I believe, whether it was mentioned or not, that there was a way for that city to seem to be responsible to its aging population by providing that as a solution instead of forcing developers to build more senior housing. And to your point, it also then provided the ability to provide that family support structure within the footprint of one property.
Yes.
What happened and is happening because of the fast tracking, and now because it has now overlapped the lack of housing in general in the state of California, is what was basically a solution for senior housing and maybe reintegration of family support structures. And a happenstance of that wasn't intentional is because the market pricing is so high, you now had family members that were younger that were starting families that were now able to actually own or live in the environment in which they were born and raised in their backyard of their parents, or in some cases, they would be the ones in the main house, and the
Mhm.
parents would now basically be in the auxiliary unit. And it brought families together in a support capacity. So that was actually a positive outgrowth of that.
Yes, it
When
is.
it became multiple units on the same footprint with a higher density, in order to meet now also this other aspect, which is housing
Yes.
shortage, I think we now have negative pushback because there's some communities now that are reevaluating their ADU policies. There's some communities that are saying, well, you took out all the carports in the apartments and turned them into ADUs, and now there's parking
Now
issues.
there's no parking.
Right. So
Yeah.
it starts to kind of start to falter now into this zone, which unfortunately we seem to be we're talking about it all the time now. All of a sudden we're not talking about it, which is what do you call what do they call them, like group homes,
Right. Yep.
right? Because I remember when the group homes conversation was happening and everybody was against it because it was being utilized as a category in order to establish recovery businesses in neighborhoods that where the neighbors felt it was inappropriate, right? And I would caution people that were just screaming about being against group homes that when you're basically talking about being anti group homes, you're also eliminating the possibility for things like six, not, what is it, 6 beds or less
Yes.
board and care.
Yep.
That those are also under the category group homes, right? So the language we use, whether it's ADA, universal design, aging in place, forever homes, ADU, high density, affordable housing, workforce housing, market cost housing, the terminology that we use in conversing about these issues that are very important and timely issues in our society is super critical. And if we're lazy in the language that we use as it being what is just the nomenclature, no, this is what we call it. We, in our positions of being basically public facing, have an opportunity to educate that the questions and the solutions are a lot more nuanced and complex, but they're also very encouraging and empowering if we embrace them that way. So, how do we go about dealing with the ADU situation, but where
Yes.
we also don't sacrifice this ground gained for quality of life, ageless housing?
Yes, and then but then the other issue that we have, which we see in new build a lot, is multi-gen housing, where the homes are designed to have an older family member
Right,
living there, hopefully on the lower level, hopefully with a larger bathroom that they can get in and out of,
right.
and those kind of things. So,
Not necessarily though, because some of the next gen housing that I've seen still doesn't do that. And in fact, when they first started putting out next gen housing, the next gen primary sensitivity
right,
was to energy conservation and sustainability.
yes,
Wasn't this other layer. And I don't know whether it's because the subject of somebody getting older is so like uncomfortable for people to talk to each other about that it doesn't come up. But again, it's like everything else in life. If you proactively take action in advance to drive and empower yourself towards an outcome that you desire, you are more likely to achieve it and feel good about it. Plus, there's a realistic positive in terms of money and value. Because if you can get 5 or 10 or 15 or plus whatever years out of your home that you now have modified to meet your needs going forward proactively, doesn't mean you've reduced the quality of life. You've actually added layers to keep it enhanced and enriched and more sustainable. If you do that, especially a market like today, which is basically somewhat flat, right? You are able to not only continue the quality of life in a familiar surrounding of your neighborhood, your neighbors, your support system, knowing everything, all the services are near you, when the rest of the real estate market is saying you got to scale down and move somewhere else, and you're basically going to give away some of the quality of life that has appreciated in your home and your neighborhood over the years you've been in there by moving away from that. But if you actually figure out a way to stay in that home and be able to hold off the sell or the transition 5 to 10, 15 years, you're now in more of a driver's seat of when you
Yes.
sell and what the market value is at that time. And you've also gained the ability to continue and maintain a quality of life that you want on your terms longer. So there, it's not just it's not an aesthetic solution only. It is not a just a freedom of mobility solution only. It has direct impact on your portfolio and family assets.
Well, and there's a lot of value to building your home, especially as our population ages and
Bingo.
and the number of people in our population who are older increases. Homes that have opportunities
Are
for
going to
old
be more desirable, and
are
there's
going to
not
be
enough
more desirable.
inventory of them, so you basically can garner a better selling price.
Single
Yes,
story homes.
you're a
Homes,
sharp cookie, my friend. That's exactly right.
exactly right. Single story homes are so hard to find, and homes with downstairs bedrooms, the same thing. They're very difficult to find,
Yep.
but they're not impossible. The good thing is things like elevators are much easier to install in homes than they ever were. That's always an opportunity, but that's another subject for another
Well,
day.
but I mean, when you start looking at these solutions to add into an environment, I think the important thing also to emphasize is that you can do it piecemeal, product by product, or you can actually plan for it in such a way that as simply as putting in, like let's say we're doing a bathroom remodel because the kids moved out and I'm remodeling the bathrooms or whatever. 20 cents worth of plywood in the right location at the right height in the behind the tile that's expensive that you waited 3 months to get from Italy, okay, is going to make it a lot easier for you to install a grab bar, one that's maybe aesthetically to your liking, or maybe even one that's hidden in the wall, like Kohler has some of those, and
Yes.
basically account for all of that in advance so that you don't basically have to go and basically rip out that tile or risk the thing not holding or whatever later. So I think even when you are looking at solutions to incorporate, it's important to note and be reminded that you have the ability to approach it from a holistic perspective of an overall effect of what you want your overall quality of life to be in that environment. You don't have to settle for, here's the suction cup things that are from Walmart, and here's the,
Yeah.
not knocking Walmart, but like you're getting some from Amazon, you're drilling the wall and putting it on the weekend. Great, but I think having a master plan for how you're going to retrofit the whole house. Are you gonna put in a a sauna or a steam? Are you going to do in a wellness layer in the house that basically allows you to maintain your health, mental state during the course? Like, there's other layers to this that are health and wellness that we all could benefit from, whether we are having difficulty mobility wise or we are in a wheelchair temporarily or otherwise. I mean, you got people that are older people, active adults, I would say, that are weekend warriors. They bicycle, they have knee surgeries, they have hip replacements, they have things of that nature, right? So if you basically have a house that you're doing remodeling to because it's been time, you want to remodel the kitchen, remodel the bathroom, change the rooms, open up corridors. If you already build all that in there, no matter what life throws at you, you're
It
more
will always
likely to be able to navigate it.
right, and to stay there and to make it a more
Well,
pleasant situation.
because when you're impacted like that, you're already taking a hit on your psychological state of mind. You're being released from a hospital, whatever, right? The last thing I think you would want to do is go to that sanctuary and home environment that you are looking to hold you, okay, and end up basically where you're now additionally impacted because your home has been ripped apart. So your sanctuary is not pristine when you need it the most in order to provide for you an environment of healing.
If money was no object, what are some of the changes that you would suggest that people make? And are you saying by just listening to you, Are you saying that rather than make small changes at a time, that people should do a grander remodel?
I don't not saying that they have to do a grander remodel. I'm saying that, and I advise this to all my clients, even though your rollout and implementation may be in phases, it is really good to have a master plan of where you want to end,
Okay. All right.
right? Because you can still phase it, you can still stagger it, you can still do it in a manner that makes sense what comes first and what's more priority and what's more important, right? But I think if you have a master plan, and that goes actually for people that have enough room to put in an ADU, that goes out also to the outside environment, the outside
Yes.
backyard, right? Engagement, especially in places like California where we have the ability to, you appreciate the weather for majority of the year. Like that's part of that step outside, be in nature, be around your roses, whatever. Like, how do you engage people in their outside as well as the inside, indoor outdoor living? I think some of the things that I would say is in most cases, most people look at their kitchens, look at their bathrooms, right? And because that's sort of it's sort of an understandable renovation project for an existing home,
Yes.
right?
People understand that.
Right. But when you're doing that, are you accounting, for example, that you may have multi generations in your household, whether on holidays only or other times? Are you going to want, for example, it's important for you that grandma basically is able to share the recipes for the stuff that she may have done with your grandkids or with her grandkids around a environment in the kitchen where now it's a social gathering space? Or is grandma going to be sitting in the other room or in the wheelchair feeling isolated from the experience? Like there's things like that that are almost bespoke customizable to every family in how they basically live and what their aspirations are in passing on legacy and traditions. So I think bathrooms and kitchens is one of the things. Bathrooms, depending on where it is, I agree with you 100%. The first thing that anybody should do is figure out a way to basically maybe niche out or add on a a a sleeping area that maybe could be multifunctional, in anticipation
Mhm.
for maybe needing to care for a parent, or maybe somebody gets injured temporarily and needs to be, a bed needs to be rolled in there. It could double up as an office, could double up as a gym. Is
Yes.
is 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 fitness and health an important factor for people's lives? In which case, how can we incorporate some of those features like steam sauna maybe in that bathroom remodel that you're doing? Do we provide a sauna and a workout area in the gym and or gym area in one of the garages? Do we bring that into a home? Because then you're able to maintain your fitness regimen more so than every time I got to get in a car and go to the gym necessarily. Plus, there's a cost saving in a way. Um, but there's also things as simple as if you're redoing the front yard or redoing some landscaping.
Hmm.
Uh, a lot of people may want to do, step ups or, kind of things. But you could easily do like a very leisurely ramp that basically leads
Yes.
to the front door and
Hmm.
hide it even within the landscaping. And
Yes.
I got to tell you, if, regardless, if you're at an airport, for example, and there's a
Hmm.
ramp, you use the ramp.
Sure,
Like
you do.
ramp is kind of an
Absolutely.
interesting thing, right?
Yeah.
Stairs. It's not that you won't take the stairs, but there's other ways to basically infuse some of this stuff. So if you're going to incur cost or add money in improvements to your house, you should definitely be considering for yourself, for loved ones, to your point, for potential resale to an aging population that is well heeled and has the resources. What would be some of the things you should incorporate into your design? Because the incremental additional cost, if there is one actually, is minimal. The fee, the value is in having the right people on board that are guiding you, willing to have these conversations with you, willing to basically ask these questions that are not necessarily, that may seem a little intrusive, but in a very respectful way, and then basically designing and planning the project to account for all these things that you may want to now add on as incremental benefits. The cost tends to be minuscule. You're still going to use hard surfaces. You're still going to build that kitchen counter. You're still going to basically do a renovation on the corridors. You may replace your doors. So do you widen your doors now and just put in a 36-inch door if you can versus 24? Not necessarily everywhere if it's an existing house, but wherever you can. Do you take out little column separations in the hallways that allow for 4 foot, circulation, or at the very least 3 foot clearances between things? So it's applying some of that universal design and ADA guidelines that we use in commercial, because every hotel that anybody's gone to, every restaurant that everybody's gone to since 90, whatever it was, 97, I think was the ADA came in. Okay. Every one of those has factored in those requirements to some degree or the other because they were forced to.
Yes.
Residential real estate, residential construction development does not have that requirement. But I have argued for the last at least decade that any smart contractor, any smart home builder that is basically looking to appeal to a group of people that are usually not addressed, their needs are not addressed, and in doing so provide a product that not only meets the needs of everybody else but also meets the needs of this group of people, which tend to be in a position, most cases, especially in places like California, like Southern California and Orange County, where it's an affluent base.
Mhm.
I mean, somebody may actually have somebody who is a child that for life has actually been, a paraplegic or had an accident in high school or a surfing accident. And now for the next God knows how many years, the long life that they may have, they are now facing these difficulties. It's
Yes.
not just an aging situation, it's a universal solution
Yes.
that benefits everybody.
It is. It is. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We loved chatting with you, Dan. I hope that you'll come back.
Oh,
I'm
and you
glad
can, I would love to come back anytime.
I'm glad that we had some time to talk about your trip to Africa and your midlife transformation, so to
If I
speak.
if I may, Valerie, I just want to tell people, if you're interested in finding out more about that midlife transformation thing and sort of the pivot, go to the Rad Life, THERAADLIFE.com, right? The whole thing in the URL, and check it out. There's a magazine there. There's articles there. There's a link to the podcast that's been going on for 10 years with new episodes there. And some recommendations of stuff that I actually use. It's not really influencer stuff. It's stuff that I use to basically enhance my life at this point. And there's a whole bunch of reading books too that I love to read. So I've shared a lot of book titles that I've read. And let me know what you guys think. Reach out to me. And Valerie, yeah, absolutely. I will take you up on an invitation anytime.
We'd love to have you. So one thing I loved about today's conversation is that it reminds us that design isn't just about how a space looks, but how it lives and how we can live in that space. So whether it's an ADU for a parent, a multi-gen home that keeps a family close, or simply updating a bathroom or a kitchen for safety and dignity, the spaces we create shape the way that we age, connect, and thrive. Rod, you've shown us that the design can be a form of freedom and might inspire you to jump off a cliff into a waterfall, and it can support independence, nurture wellness, and give families the tools to face the transitions with confidence instead of fear and instead of uncertainty. So thank you, Rod, very much for
My,
sharing your insights
my
and your
pleasure,
passion.
Valerie.
So until next time, remember to come back again next week for another episode of Always Ageless. Remember, age is just a number, but how you design your life and your space, that is always ageless. Thank you, Rod, for being with us today.
Thank you, my friend.